The NBA was robbed.
Sabonis goes around him for the slam.
Fans were robbed.
Shaq comes out to play him. Sabonis goes around him for the slam.
Basketball itself was robbed, and the theme: politics, betrayal, and a broken system that sacrificed Arvydas Sabonis before the world ever truly saw him.
One of the best to ever put on a basketball uniform.
Imagine a 7'3" giant who could pass like Magic Johnson, shoot threes like Larry Bird, and battle Shaq without fear. Now imagine that player trapped behind the Iron Curtain, his prime years wasted, his body destroyed by coaches who treated him like a war machine instead of a human being. This isn't just a story about a basketball player. This is a Cold War tragedy wrapped in sneakers, a tale of betrayal, conspiracy, and what might be the greatest what if in sports history. Now, before we dive in, hit subscribe because stories like this don't just change how you see basketball, they change how you see history. Arvydas Sabonis didn't just play basketball. He redefined what a giant could do. He was 7'3", but he wasn't a lumbering big man by any means. He moved with grace, threading no-look passes, draining shots from the perimeter, and bullying anyone foolish enough to step into the paint. Fans who saw him young swear he wasn't just ahead of his time, he was decades ahead. But here's the injustice. Most NBA fans never got to see that version of him. By the time Sabonis stepped onto an NBA court, his knees were wrecked, his ankles were scarred, and his body had been through battles that would have broken lesser men. What Portland got in the mid-90s wasn't the full monster. It was the ghost of a legend, limping, but still deadly. And that's what makes his story so infuriating. Imagine if Wilt Chamberlain had been forced to play half his career in secret, under foreign watch, and then tossed into the NBA only when broken down. That's what happened with Sabonis. He wasn't just late to the league, he was stolen from it. In 1986, the Portland Trail Blazers made one of the boldest draft moves in NBA history. They picked Arvydas Sabonis, knowing full well he might never play a single minute for them. Now, on paper, it looked insane. Why waste a first-round pick on a man locked behind the Iron Curtain? But Portland wasn't crazy, they had intel. They knew Sabonis was the kind of player who could tilt the balance of power in the NBA. The problem was, Moscow knew it too. The Soviet Union treated Sabonis like a priceless national treasure, one they had no intention of handing over to the West. He wasn't just an athlete, he was a propaganda weapon, proof that communism could produce greatness. Every dunk, every rebound was framed as political dominance. America had Magic, Bird, and Jordan. The Soviets had Sabonis, and they weren't letting him go. Now, here's where it gets ugly. Fans in Portland kept waiting year after year while Sabonis was forced to play under fluorescent lights in dusty gyms across Europe, guarded by party officials like a prisoner. Rumors swirled that US intelligence agencies even monitored his games hoping for a defection. Imagine it, basketball talent so great it became a geopolitical pawn. That wasn't a draft pick, it was a Cold War standoff. By his early 20s, Sabonis looked like a basketball god, but inside, his body was cracking. His feet, ankles, and knees were already screaming from the constant grind. Western doctors who examined him later were shocked, claiming his legs had the wear and tear of a man twice his age. But in the Soviet system, rest wasn't an option. If the state wanted him on the court, he played, no matter the cost. Rumors swirled that Soviet doctors pumped him full of painkillers, strapping him up and sending him back into games he had no business playing in. There were whispers of injections before tip-off, of rehab programs cut short, of a culture where no wasn't a word an athlete could say. Sabonis himself later admitted that he was pushed into games while severely hurt, his body breaking down a little more each time. This wasn't training, it was exploitation. And here's the gut punch. Fans debate endlessly what Sabonis might have been if he'd been protected instead of sacrificed. Could he have rivaled Kareem's scoring or even redefined the center position decades before Dirk and Jokic made big men versatile? Instead, his prime was drained away in service of politics. His injuries weren't just bad luck, They were the direct result of a system that treated him like a pawn, not a human being. In 1988, Sabonis delivered his greatest triumph, and America's greatest humiliation. At the Seoul Olympics, he led the Soviet Union past David Robinson and the mighty US squad. To Portland fans, it was like watching their future star stab them in the back. Imagine it, the man you drafted, the man you prayed to see in red and black, standing tall in Soviet colors while crushing your country's pride on the world stage. But the victory didn't feel clean. The refereeing that night was questionable, to say the least. Whistles seemed to bend in favor of the Soviets, and US fans cried foul before the final buzzer even sounded. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire. Was this basketball or Cold War theater? Was Sabonis a champion that day, or just another chess piece in a game rigged by politics? From Moscow's view, it was perfect. Sabonis became a national hero, a giant who carried the hammer and sickle across the finish line. But the irony was brutal. The better he performed for the Soviets, the less chance America ever had of seeing him in the NBA. His gold medal was celebrated in Russia, cursed in the US, and remembered everywhere as one of the most controversial basketball wins in history. Now, it took nearly a decade, but in 1995, Portland finally brought Arvydas Sabonis to the NBA. Only by then, he wasn't the towering prodigy scouts once drooled over. He was 31, battle-scarred, and moving on legs that barely held together. Fans expected a washed-up big man, a relic too late to the party. What they got instead was a glimpse of just how terrifying this man once was. Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq, the most dominant center of his generation, later admitted Sabonis was one of the toughest matchups he ever faced. Think about that. Shaq, the man who bulldozed legends night after night, called out Sabonis as a problem even in his broken state. That tells you everything you need to know. Imagine what Sabonis would have done in his prime with fresh legs and no scars. The NBA world shudders just thinking about it. Oh, and Portland fans? Well, they fell in love instantly. Even half-speed, Sabonis dropped dimes from the high post, bullied defenders in the paint, and drained shots that no 7-footer was supposed to make back then. He was supposed to be finished, but instead he forced the league to respect him. If a broken Sabonis could humble Shaq, what in the world had the NBA missed out on all those lost years? Now, here's the cold truth. The NBA never got Arvydas Sabonis. Not the real one, anyway. Not the 22-year-old unicorn who could pass like magic, shoot like Bird, and dominate like Shaq all rolled into one. What the league got was a legend in fragments, a man patched together with tape and grit, long after the damage had been done. Ask the players who faced him in Europe during the 80s, and you'll hear tales that sound more like myths than memories. They talk about a giant threading no-look passes, hitting three-pointers with ease, and bullying all-star level talent like they were junior varsity kids. To them, Sabonis wasn't just good, he was untouchable. But those highlights never made it to American TV. Instead, they linger in whispers, passed down like folklore. And that's what makes this story so haunting. The NBA record books can't capture the truth about Sabonis. His prime existed in gyms most fans never saw, under flags that silenced his future.
Forzando mucho la falta personal, busca la personal del contrario. Sabonis, qué cosa ha hecho Sabonis.
He's less a player of stats and rings and more a ghost story told by those who swear they witnessed a giant the world was never meant to forget. I mean, picture this for a second. A young Sabonis, 7'3" and unstoppable, standing across from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the late 80s. Kareem with his skyhook, Sabonis with his strength and range. Two basketball philosophies colliding like titans. Fans should have seen it. Instead, it lives only in imagination. A lost duel that could have defined an era. Now, imagine Sabonis facing Patrick Ewing in his prime. Ewing's power against Sabonis' finesse. Or a playoff showdown with Hakeem Olajuwon, where Sabonis' passing brilliance countered the Dream's footwork. The possibilities were endless. And what about Jordan's Bulls? The thought of Sabonis anchoring a Blazers squad against MJ's dynasty isn't just tantalizing, it's maddening. These matchups should have been NBA classics, burned into highlight reels forever. Instead, we're left with shadows of what could have been. By the time Sabonis finally battled Shaq, his body was already crumbling. Fans got glimpses. A pass here, jumper there, but not the wars those rivalries deserved. It's like the NBA handed us the trailer of an epic movie but locked the full film in a vault. And that vault was stamped out with one word: politics. By the late 90s, Sabonis was a pillar in Portland. Still brilliant, still dangerous, but carrying a body held together by tape and prayers.
15 to 20. Sabonis, his second three of the series he hit.
The Blazers had built a powerhouse around him. Rasheed Wallace, Scottie Pippen, Damon Stoudemire, Steve Smith. On paper, they were stacked. In reality, they became the poster child for missed chances. None bigger than the infamous 2000 Western Conference Finals. Game 7 against the Lakers. Portland up by 15 in the fourth quarter. Sabonis battling Shaq. Pippen shadowing Kobe. The Blazers on the brink of shattering the NBA's golden dynasty in the making. Then, it all unraveled. Shot after shot clanged off the rim. Whistles seemed to tilt one way, and suddenly the Lakers roared back. The Staples Center erupted and Portland was left stunned in silence. To this day, Blazers fans insist that collapse wasn't just bad luck. Some point at the referees, whispering about a league that needed a Lakers dynasty, not a Portland breakthrough. Was it incompetence? Was it favoritism? Or was it flat out rigged? Whatever the truth, Sabonis was right there in the middle of it, fighting, limping, and giving everything he had, and still watching the dream slip away. For Portland, the night wasn't just a loss. It was a wound that never healed. Arvydas Sabonis' career is not a story of fulfillment. It's a story of loss. A 7'3" genius trapped by politics, broken by injuries, and delivered to the NBA far too late. He gave glimpses of brilliance, enough to prove he was real, but never enough to satisfy the hunger of what might have been. His name doesn't spark highlight reels, it sparks arguments, conspiracies, and late-night debates that always end with the same question: what if? What if he had been freed from the Soviet Union in his prime? What if his body hadn't been treated like a disposable weapon by a system that demanded sacrifice? What if the Blazers had gotten him 10 years earlier? Would the Bulls dynasty have been different? Would Shaq still be called the most dominant center of all time? Would the record books tell a completely different story? We'll never know. And maybe that's why Sabonis lingers in our minds longer than some players with rings and trophies. His greatness is unfinished. His legend untamed. His story eternal. So if you want to hear more of these hidden sagas, the stories the NBA would rather you forget, make sure you hit subscribe, because Arvydas Sabonis is proof that sometimes the most powerful stories in basketball are the ones that never get to be completed.